Well, thank you everyone for coming. On behalf of the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art Leadership Council and staff, I am delighted to welcome you to a conversation on collecting with Jordan Schnitzer. Today's program has been organized in conjunction with our special exhibition, Emancipating the Past, Kara Walker's Tales of Slavery and Power, which closes on Sunday. So if you haven't seen it or want to see it again, we'll have an opportunity to do that after today's talk. And the exhibition, which is one of the reasons we're here today, comes from the impressive and ever-growing collection of Jordan Schnitzer and his family foundation. Some of you may know that Jordan has the largest collection of contemporary American prints in this country, perhaps the world. Hence I say ever-growing. And he is also one of the most generous lenders of art from private collection that any of us know. He sets an incredible example. You'll, I know, come back and see many of our other shows, but next January we'll be opening another exhibition from Jordan's collection called Under Pressure. And I think you passed some of that information around. It's an absolutely fabulous collection with a number of different artists, different techniques that I know will be just great to look at, but also wonderful for our teaching program. I'd also like to take this opportunity to recognize Jessie DiTilio, who can raise her hand. And Jessie is the curator of the Kara Walker Show and will be joining us upstairs after our talk for any of you who may want to learn more about the exhibition and Kara Walker. So I really want to thank Jessie for everything she's done for this show and how wonderful it's been working with her. And the Kara Walker exhibition continues for about 2 more years to museums across the country. So you can see some of that listing on our website. I think it's also in the brochure for the exhibition. So if you have friends in those locations, make sure they know that it's coming. We wouldn't want them to miss it. So a little bit of background on Jordan. I could spend a lot of time talking about Jordan, but I'd like Jordan to talk to you more about his collecting interests and his passion for art. But according to my records, you began collecting at the age of 14 when you purchased a small painting from the Fountain Gallery. And I don't know which painting or artist.
It's a Louis Bunt study called Sanctuary, and it was $75. With my discount, it was $60. I paid $5 a month for 12 months, and on the back it says, the first piece of the Schnitzer collection, bought on the night of June 1st, 1965.
And one of the reasons Jordan probably got that discount, other than the fact that he was young and deserved it, is that his mother had started and ran that gallery. So Arlene Schnitzer really is, I mean, you cannot overcredit what your mother has done for the arts of the Portland Pacific Northwest region, that she both showed the work and collected the work and supported artists so that they would stay in their communities and create a thriving cultural milieu to work in and that we could all enjoy rather than going off to New York or other places. So as a result of that, Jordan grew up with a family that collected and knew a lot of these artists firsthand. So I know that many of you may have seen the Provenance exhibition that we had.
Sorry.
Okay.
Try to move it to the other side.
Okay, I'm sorry if it's not working. I can yell. Okay.
I can see the day the Emerald.
Right.
Museum director Jill Hartz takes her clothes off in front of 100 people in the museum.
Right.
And we call it performance art.
I was going to say it's contemporary art, right? Okay, here we go. All right, so in 1988, Jordan began collecting contemporary prints and multiples in a very serious way. Inspired, I think, by the inventiveness of the medium and the number of artists that you really like, that you were able to acquire in this way. And the collection, which is both his own personal collection as well as a foundation collection, includes such post-World War II artists as, and these are all like blue chip artists, Andy Warhol, Ellsworth Kelly, John Baldessari, Roy Lichtenstein, Frank Stella, Bruce Nauman, Jim Dine, Chuck Close, and Kara Walker. And that's only to name some of the over 250 artists that are in your collection. Today, the Jordan Schnitzer Family Foundation manages an active lending program, and I think some of that material may have been shared with you already, that has two goals very close to your heart. One is to make work easily accessible to qualified institutions, especially in less served communities, so that this art can get out there and people can see it that normally would not be able to see this. And supporting exhibitions that foster education and inquiry. I think that your passion to make sure that even the youngest among us, and we do a lot with K-12 populations, find art a part of their lives and expect it and inspired by it and understand that it's reflecting them is core to a lot of what you do. And most recently, and I brought this, you've started a publishing enterprise of artists' books of artists in your collection, which is absolutely fabulous. So in an age of virtuality, we still have the print, and I know that many of us really love to open these books and look at these works.
Fun.
So thank you for that. So creating a long and lasting impact through the arts has also inspired Jordan to provide significant funding for the renovation and addition to this facility, which bears his name and for which we are deeply grateful, and also a new project that you're beginning at Washington State University, which will be, I like to think of it as the Schnitzer 2. We're the junior. Today, I've asked Jordan to talk more about how he started collecting, why he collects, and this can be a conversation not just with me, but with all of you too. So, do you still have the bunts?
Still do. It's in my dressing room. I see it every morning.
Okay.
It's been with me ever since. But before we start to allow you time to get hooked up, we had a lunch a few minutes ago with a number of the council members, and I meant to do something for Hope Pressman, and I forgot to, so if you'll beg my indulgence for a second. Since my whole experience at the University of Oregon in terms of the arts began with Hope, and I had a lunch for her about 2 months ago, so I brought something for you, and I forgot to give it to you, and you can, you've seen it, so you can open it, but
How do I open it?
here.
There I go.
You got your hand too.
So this is a framed sort of montage of pictures of the last, we don't want to admit anymore how many years, from the mid-'70s on of a number of the things we did at the museum here. Okay, so there you go. Look at that. And two things. One, we had I think, really wonderful. I hope the other people at lunch, some of your council members thought it was a productive conversation, but for all of you who were here for lunch, if you could get up and leave now so I don't sound like a fool repeating the same things I said. I will say, and we should digress for 1 second, to talk about the Hope relationship, just so some of you that haven't heard that. But when I went here for 3 years, my sophomore, junior, and senior year, PLC was just really ugly. There was a dead tree and a bike rack and some newspaper things, and I'd had a tradition when I graduated 8th grade in high school of giving a piece of art to the school. So I thought about redesigning that courtyard, and I called the president's office to try to figure out how you do that on the campus. Next thing I knew, I was invited to a meeting with Dr. Robert Clark, and when I explained what I wanted to do, he was very receptive, but said that it is complicated to get things done on a university campus. And they had just formed the University of Oregon Foundation, and their third employee was a woman named Hope Pressman. And she was assigned to help me go through the labyrinth of committees and redesign the courtyard. And that's how our love affair began. And we've been working in the trenches in the arts, and especially with this campus and this museum ever since. And as I said at your lunch, and this talks about really civic activities in general, we're also fortunate when we get to come together with others that we might not otherwise meet and develop new friendships and work towards wonderful community goals. I wish I could get up and tell you about some wonderful real estate deals I've done. I certainly could tell you about the disastrous ones I've done during these last 6 years of the recession, but I think we learn in life that when we have financial success, we tend to be a little more humble about it, or at least whenever I'm feeling good about the results we're having, then I seem to be getting kicked in the butt with some problem that occurs. Whereas when you come together on civic things, you can all shout to the stars about how wonderful it was to work together towards helping with a relief nursery, an art museum, or whatever the cultural and civic cause was. So we shared many, many happy times together and still are. And when you're lucky enough to get to have an influence of someone like Hope in your life, it doesn't get much better. So thank you. Okay. Okay, now, your first question was?
I'm going to go on to my second question because you answered the first about bunts and whether you still have that.
Yes.
But 1988 is a pivotal time when you actually turn to works on paper and prints, and what's behind that?
I think part of it was fortuitous. Like many things in life, you don't sit there planning everything out. It seems like when you plan everything out, things go askew. My mother had closed the Fountain Gallery of Art, which she had operated for 25 years. And looking back as an only child, I think in hindsight I felt a sense of loss. There's been a big part in my life. My mother wasn't home at 3 o'clock with hot-baked fresh cookies every day and milk. She was a working mother, and she'd be out of the house in the morning, and she'd fly in at 6 o'clock, and we'd sit down for dinner. And there'd be calls at 8 o'clock at night from an artist that had a toothache, and she'd call a dentist friend and say, would you mind trading a piece of art for, an inlay and whatever, all those things gallery owners do. So when she closed the gallery, I was in sort of a transition. There was no question about my commitment to continuing to collect Northwest art because I love the artists and had learned from her the importance, as you said, for all of us supporting art in our regions with whatever region we're in. Because if we don't support those arts, visual, music, dance, performance, all the art forms, whatever appeals to you, then think about what our communities would be like. They'd be pretty empty, pretty dull. And from just the business hat on, healthy communities create business opportunities. And healthy communities are communities that are broad-based with a diversity of educational, cultural, natural, and human capital resources.
Well, and for those of us that work in museums, if we don't introduce the arts at an early age in the schools, if kids don't grow up expecting the arts, why should they go look for them later?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that ties into to this theme. So she had closed the gallery. I was on the board of the Portland Art Museum, came up, as I said earlier, went to an exhibition of prints of the New York School, of Ellsworth Kelly, Rauschenberg, all those big names. And I thought, I've been almost completely loyal to the Northwest artists. This might be fun while I'm continuing that commitment to local art to buy a few things, works on paper of those artists. I bought a few more. One asks, well, where did you put it? And I guess I'd say, look, if you had a mother that had an art gallery, I heard a million times when someone said, gee, Arlene, I'd love to buy that Carl Morris or Mike Rousseau or Louis Bunce, but I don't have any wall space. To which she said, the merchant that she was, look, Jack, if you love that work, then just buy it. And whether you put it under your bed or whether you rotate it, don't let it go if you feel that the work speaks to you just because you don't have wall space. So I blew through wall space before I finished college down here, okay? And I just kept buying these prints. And then sitting in this building, it was then director David Robertson in 1995 that said, I understand you have a couple hundred prints. Could we borrow a few? He did. I came down to the gallery where the Marché Cafe is. It was transformational to see the work up, both because other than a William Wegman with a dog on a chair, and I think there was a Jim Dine, I'd had both those in the house. The others had been in storage. And most of us don't have walls like you do in museums. And Larry Fong, the wonderful curator, had done a fascinating job of organizing the work. And I remember that feeling walking in to that exhibition. It was like walking into a room of friends, even though I'd never met any of those artists. And that, I think, is a central theme, one of the central themes of why art's so important to us. You develop a very unique, special relationship when you're lucky enough to live with art around you. No different than I think you go to a Trailblazer game or a Duck game, and you're sitting there cheering on that basketball or that football or that runner or whatever, and yet you don't know them, and yet you speak to them, you know, go Jack, go this, go Marcus, go. Well, with the art, you develop that very intimate relationship when you live with art, and the way it speaks to you and changes over the seasons and over the years. So to walk in and see all that art and the way it was curated was an amazing experience. Yes?
May I ask a question? Sure. I'm curious about when you were a sophomore, junior, and senior, and you were collecting art and you were filling the walls in your apartment. Mm-hmm. What did your friends think about all of that?
You mean when they weren't smoking dope? No, anyway. No.
Right, yeah, I mean.
It was just part of me. And therefore, looking back on the friends, because I remember exactly what I had. I was in 1515 Hilliard was the last place. And I had some photographs I'd bought, commercial ones, not fancy ones, of just some river scenes and whatever that were on the wall. I had a box, a carved box by Don Wilson. I had the Louis Bunt study. I had remember those years when those, from ships, those spoon
tables?
Yeah, the things, the things on ships with the two heavy wood things that we all made in tables with blocks.
Yeah,
Right. And a blue beanbag chair, and you know, and I was a classmate of Steve Prefontaine, so I spent a fair amount of time with Steve. And but I think it was just sort of natural for them. I think having known me to see some art, and again there were some those commercial poster things that were on the walls too. It just wasn't all the original art.
So how did you acquire the art? I mean, did you start reading books about artists? Because some of these were not the artists your mother was carrying. These were either blue chip or other artists. So I'm wondering what the process was of developing the connoisseurship and figuring out what to buy.
Well, I think going back to both questions, having grown up in the gallery, I was lucky because I was always there, and therefore I learned almost unconsciously just to respond to things. And I'd ask questions, and I'd see things I didn't like, and I'd be puzzled and whatever. So in my case, because I was exposed to art a lot, I didn't have to sort of be told, this is good, that's good. I was going to a gallery, so therefore the work that was there, aside from it being my mother's gallery, already had that stamp of approval that it was recognized as being quality art. And I think that's of the many gifts my mother gave me, one of them was learning how to appreciate art and how to be okay about liking or not liking art. Mm-hmm. So I don't ever remember being ever told. Right. It just was learning to experience it, and therefore jumping ahead to the '88 period when she closed the gallery and I started buying the prints, I just responded. Mm-hmm. I just responded to things just like I do now, just with a passion of, God, I love that Jim Dine, I love that Frankenthaler, I love that Ed Ruscha, I love that, Nicola Lopez, Gober, Damien Hirst, on and on.
Well, these days, it's hard to find you without an auction catalog in your hand, either one that's happening at the event or coming up and, figuring out all the things you could possibly have. Did you start working with auctions at the beginning, or did you go to galleries, or how did that happen?
So, as I mentioned, I came up from a board meeting at the Portland Art Museum, and there was this show of contemporary prints curated by the late Gordon Gilkey. And Gordon Gilkey we'd known, and for those of you who remember, he was one of those monuments men that's in that movie today, and he was amply rewarded. He had lapel things from Belgium, France, a number of places, and he had been the dean of arts at Oregon State, and he was not only an artist and printmaker, but he was a printaholic, as I am. He was even more in that he would often trade his work for other work. So he had, at the time I was on the Art Museum board, 20,000 prints. A lot of them weren't, let's call it blue chip, but a huge collection. And we voted to accept at the Portland Art Museum his collection, create a Gilkey Print Center, and a curatorial position for him. Hope and I and others had put on an event here honoring him and raised some money for the museum here on one of our dinners here. So
you were, how you acquired your prints, how
right.
what
So
the process was.
I went up to that exhibition that he'd curated, saw that work, and it was co-curated by Bob Cox of the Ogden Gallery, who I'm still just partner in crime with all these years. And I went down to Bob's gallery and saw some work, and I happened to buy still remember, of course, a David Hockney from the Blue Guitar series. It's a little image of a little Picasso head. I bought a Frank Stella that was a purple triangle, and a Jim Dine that was a heart, a skull, and a cross. And when I was there, I saw Frankenthaler and some others, and prices were pretty reasonable. The Japanese had revved things up, and then that art market collapsed. So I bought a few more and a few more. And then, as I say, something delightful and disastrous happened, is that I got a catalog from Sotheby's, soon thereafter Christie's, Butterfield's, which is now Bonham's, and my daughters, who are now 15 and about to be 17, for any of you with daughters that used to, when they were like, from 5 to about 11, go to a Toys R Us, we'd go by the Barbie section, and oh my God, the shirts would be torn to shreds. Daddy, I want this, you can have one. Why can't I have two? Okay, two, fine. Why can't I have three? Oh, it never stopped, okay? Well, when I got these catalogs, I remember calling up Sotheby's, that we know where they got it from, right? So I called up Sotheby's, and I was looking at their print catalog, and I called up, and they answered, and I usually ask if there's anyone from New York here. Anyone from New York here? Okay, I better be nice. I won't say, they answered that phone in that sort of snotty New York tone, like, what kind of idiot are you? And I said, gee, I'd like to bid on some prints. And they said, well, in that tone, look, on the back of the book, there's a page, and you fill it in, and you fax it into the bid department. And I said, it's not big enough. She said, what do you mean? I said, there's only 4 lines. She said, what do you want? I said, well, on page 1, it starts off with Annie Albers, Joseph Albers, Diebenkorn, Christo, just page after page. There was tons of neat stuff. So to get rid of me, she transferred me to the print department. And I was the junior person in the print department came on, and I explained what I wanted to do and started working with Bob Cox. We'd ask for condition reports, and we'd go through it all, and then we'd get on a dedicated line, and we'd start bidding. And, so over the years, I was here Tuesday. I had sort of helped my 15-year-old's freshman class at Northwest Academy in Portland, 85 students, come to see the Kara Walker show. At the same time, at 10 o'clock, there was a Made in California auction for Bonham. So while I'm up here addressing the kids, I have the auction book with me, and I'm sort of bidding away while I'm talking to these kids. That's what she was referring to. So.
And usually if I'm visiting you, there are catalogs open,
right.
And it's either look at what I've just acquired, or this one got away, or I hope I'm going to get this.
So the galleries, I can't say enough about galleries, because when anyone ever asks, how do you become a collector, it's really easy. Gallery owners are wonderful. Okay? They want you to come in and not to be intimidated and to say, why did you pick this artist? Why is this artist on your walls? Tell me about the artist. And they love telling you. Okay, and you just do that. And as I've said, I mentioned earlier, I think the tragedy is just because someone has some resources, to go buy some art because you think you should is the worst. That's like saying, well, I should go buy some books for my bookshelves because I should have books on my bookshelves. Well, you should buy the books because you want to read them. I don't mean to say I've read all the books on my bookshelves. But the point is, you know, why deny yourself the wonderful joy that collecting brings you? And I think if you do it for the wrong reason, then you're only hurting yourself. You're only denying yourself what for me is one of the most wonderful experiences in my life. So I think it all starts with galleries and with museums. Docents, wow, they are just the best. Not only is it neat to be a docent, because then you get to learn from experts like you and Jesse and others about an exhibition. You get to meet other people that are also docents. Okay? So not only does your knowledge and experience and appreciation for the art just go up dramatically, but then you get to share that with the public, and for all of us, you get to hear more about an artist. I mentioned earlier, I came here as a business major, and since I started working when I was 14, I was a janitor in one of our apartment buildings, then I was a painter, and then I got tired of being a janitor and a painter, so a friend of mine who was a year older had gotten a job at Myron Frank's, you remember the one at Valley River, but in Portland, and in the women's shoe department. And you got paid commission. So not only did you get to, I was 17, get to work and get to meet a whole bunch of women, a bunch of girls, but you got paid commission. So I went home and told my folks I wasn't going to be a janitor or a painter anymore. I was going to get a job at Myron Frank's selling women's shoes. And my mother said, Harold, I think it's about time you start working in the office. So I started working in the office. And as I say, retail's loss was what, anyway. You never heard that one, did you, Sharon? Huh? Yeah.
So why do you think art speaks to you? Or what does it tell you? Or, you know, why is it your passion?
As I've suggested before, if you think about the roles of artists, okay, they are the chroniclers of our time. They've always been the chroniclers of their time. They're always reflecting the themes, the issues, the passions, the frustrations, all the issues that confront all of us. Okay? Now for me, I don't stop thinking. Okay? I mean, each of us have different patterns. I mean, I stop thinking when I fly fish, when I go skiing. I mean, there are different times. Otherwise, it just doesn't seem to stop. And I tell you, like everybody else, remember when you were in your 20s? Okay. And you may have had a few problems. And maybe this is just me, but I think it's probably more universal. You thought, if I can just sort of get through these problems, everything's going to be just fine. Whether it's parents, brother, sister, job, boss, whatever it was. And you sort of get those few problems resolved. And lo and behold, a few more appear. Okay? And you get those resolved and a few more appear. And suddenly you realize, wait a second, was I sold a bill of goods? I finally got out of school, I'm working, things are supposed to be just great. And I seem to be dealing with issues all the time, like everybody else. And you begin to realize life is it's a continuum of issues. Okay? Okay? Sometimes there are a few more, sometimes there are a few less. And as I often say, we human beings seem to be consumed with the created issues as opposed to the real issues. Okay? But that's just our human emotional makeup. For me, the reason why the art is such a critical piece is because it is a refuge. It is an escape. It's a break. It's like a vacation from myself. Okay? Now, the artists, what are they trying to do? If we suggest that they are chroniclers, then what they're really trying to make us, I think, help us do, is to think. when I was doing the Roy Lichtenstein show years ago and reading about him, he talked about the most important influence in his life was a professor named Hoyt Sherman at Ohio State. And he said that Hoyt Sherman taught him how to see. And as I say about, for instance, John Baldessari, when I talk about John Baldessari in this Stonehenge series, for instance, when I see this work, what I think is going on with John Baldessari, who is the foremost conceptual artist in the world, although he hates being called that, okay? I mean, he's taken, and this is a set of 6, he's taken an image, for instance, Stonehenge. We all can identify with that image. Now, for me, when I think of Stonehenge, I immediately think of that sort of mysterious, unknown. Was it for the Druids to tell time? Was it for religious purposes? Why was it there? Who knows? But then, interestingly enough, he does it in 6 different colors in these 6 images, right? So already another message is coming through. My God, what a beautiful abstract shape. So he's playing with us that on one hand, something that's very representational, that most of us know as an object, is also a wonderful abstract shape. Almost like that Andy Warhol saying, hey, look at that Campbell's soup can in the grocery store. Don't just think that art is in these buildings. Then he takes these images. He always uses appropriated images, meaning images in the public domain. He gets them out of newspapers. He often would go in Hollywood. There's a store that a lot of the movie studios just dump their stills from movies, and he's always buying images. He has thousands and thousands of images of pictures he's just bought that he figures he'll use at some point. So here he picks 2 images of 2 people, and then he puts these circles in front of it. So in the 6 images, he has different colors for Stonehenge and different colors of these round circles. So you look at this, okay, and this goes right back to my experience at U of O, is where I'm going to come back to in a second, and you look at this and you say, what the heck's going on here, okay? Now for me, when I see art, what I do is exactly what I learned here at PLC 180. And I had Professor Clark Griffith that taught American novel. And God, he was good with that deep southern voice, Sylvia Plath the bell jar. But I remember reading, I said earlier about Absalom, but with The Great Gatsby, with Nathaniel Hawthorne, with all these books. I'd go home into that 1515 Hilliard, and I'd read those books, and God, I loved all those American authors. And I'd come to that class, and I was so excited to hear what he had to say because I knew exactly what was going on in that novel. And he'd start telling us stuff. And he'd say, now this critic says this and this and this. And I've often thought that, Huckleberry Finn, that it's really an allegory. He'd go on. And I'd sit there saying, oh my gosh, were we reading the same book? I never thought about that layer and that layer and that layer and that layer. And what he was trying to do is teach us that critical thinking. He did not just take what's on the surface, but to realize with authors like that, they generally knew exactly what they were doing in terms of the very complex kinds of themes, just like John Baldessari. So when I see this, I tend to relate to more political and current themes. So what I see in here is immediately a reaction of, I look at this and I get confused. Drives me crazy. Why? Because I want to know what these guys are talking about. Are they friends? Are they enemies? Are they scheming? What are they doing? Come on, don't do this to me. Okay? He's driving me crazy. And I think he's driving me crazy because if we think about people, like right now, looking at all of you to hopefully make sure in my eye contact with you that I'm still interesting, okay? Okay? How do we determine from the time we're born whether someone is a friend or foe? Let's go back to the basic human instinct of survival, right? We learn when we're young to look at 2 things in terms of people: how they're moving towards us and how their face is looking at us, right? To determine whether, hey, is this safe or is this not safe? You don't even think about it because it's so ingrained in us. Unless suddenly you're walking down a dark alley or something, I mean, there are times that suddenly it hits you about, hey, right? So what I think he's doing here is our natural instinct is to want to look at their eyes, their facial expression, their mouth, the tense, not tense, whatever, And he's screwing it up on purpose. Because he first wants to seduce us. He wants to attract us to look at this nice little image of Stonehenge. Okay? So he sort of gets us into the work. Once we're there and he's got us, then he's doing things to us. Just like Faulkner and Fitzgerald and Hemingway and all those folks were too. And I think now, for me, what I'm seeing in here is in a day and age when we are so used to instantly knowing everything, and we're so cocky with our smartphones and all the data and whatever, okay, is he's forcing us to stop in our tracks. He's manipulating us in a constructive way to stop for a second, ponder what's going on, to which we'll never know. Each of us will react to this in any way we want. But in so doing, he's taken us out of where we were, given us a break, and made us think. And what you're thinking when you see this is unique to you. Just as hope, Jill, any of us. Why is it unique to us? Because each of us, if I sat down and said, tell me about growing up, brothers, sisters, parents, where did you grow up? Did you go to summer camps? What was school like? Were you in Boy Scouts? But we're all made up of millions of little facets of our lives, right? That's why we're all unique individuals. Therefore, when each of us comes and sees this work or any piece of art, the reason why the experience is such a unique experience is because we're bringing to it all that we are and have been. And that's why art is such a wonderful experience that when you're passionate about it, you want to share that and hope that everyone is able to have that experience.
That's great. That was really well said. Why Prince?
Growing up, again, with the mother of the art gallery, I mean, the majority of Northwest art are work on canvas, sculpture, some paper, whatever. I was indifferent to the medium. I mean, and I still am. I love art. I remember when there were those discussions about when David Hockney did those Xerox prints. People bitched and said, well, is this art? When the whole digital art came in, is this art? I said, wait a second, folks. I mean, that's like saying you go to a fancy restaurant and you say to the chef, well, you can only use these ingredients. Come on now. Okay, my gosh, I think artists should have any medium they want to express whatever they want to express. We're the beneficiary. You don't like it? That's fair game. You don't like what you taste at a restaurant? Don't order it again. So why Prince? Well, again, it was by accident in terms of seeing that print exhibition, going to the Ogden Gallery, buying a few of those images, buying a few more, and buying a few more, and really enjoying it. In hindsight, I think, well, gee, if I look at collectively what I spent then, could I have bought a smaller Andy Warhol painting? I guess I probably could have, not now, could have then, whatever. But that wasn't the objective. First, you haven't asked, but on the investment side, while I keep track of the art for insurance purposes, I don't carry it on any financial statements. Okay? And I have never sold anything, and I don't look at this, while I think many people can, and there's nothing wrong with looking at art as an investment, I don't. I'm in the real estate business. I want those properties to go up. Frankly, for me, when I buy something and a gallery calls up later and says, boy, you paid $8,000 for it, now it's going for $27,000, I'm really bummed out. Because the three others that I couldn't quite afford to buy then now are $27,000 versus $8,000. And since I'm never selling it, I'd rather everything stay down where I paid for it. But why that works on paper, I think, again, I started buying them and buying a few more and a few more. But what has evolved is the following. When I came up after this exhibition here, in 1995, and after I saw the work up, and the second part of that story is, which the folks at lunch heard, but it was transformational when I walked in that gallery and saw the work up. I thought it doesn't get any better. But then when people came in and did what they normally do, they smiled, they gawked, they frowned. That was so exciting to see other people sharing the excitement that I felt seeing the work. And I've told the story often, but there was a man with an 8-year-old son in front of a Robert Longo, Men in the Cities, an image like this. I scooted down next to the young man and said, gee, what do you think's going on there? Is that guy dancing and rocking out or twisting in pain and about to collapse? The wheels turned. At lunch I went, you could hear the wheels turning, and he said, I think he's dancing, to which I said, I think you're right, because whatever he would have said, I would have said, I think you're right. And the light went off then and said to me, wow, you love buying stuff. It's so exciting coming in and seeing the art. But then especially with the young man there, okay, in the Northwest, we didn't grow up with a lot of contemporary art, more now than when I was growing up. But it's still quite different. Let me do this example again. Who raised their hand about Manhattan? It was over, okay. Okay, well, tell me now, do you live there most of your life or when you were young? Okay, so let me ask you, do you remember the first time you went to a museum?
Yeah,
Well, no, I want to know exactly. Do you remember exactly when you went to a museum?
probably 8 years old.
Yeah, but you don't remember exactly, do you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Do you remember the first time you went to a museum?
I was very small.
That's right, okay. Tell me, do you remember the first time you saw a mountain?
No.
Okay, you can leave. Now, do you remember the first time you saw a mountain?
Maybe back then, upstate New York.
Okay. My point is here that if I then said, well, here, let me find someone who grew up in Portland. These are one. Okay. Do you remember the first time you saw a mountain?
Ah, yes. Yes, it was Mount Hood.
Yeah, but do you remember when you saw it?
I was about 2 years old.
That's right. Okay. Do you remember the first time you went to a museum?
It must have been about 9.
Okay. The point is, when you live in the West, okay, we've grown up with mountains, rivers, trees around us. It's pretty hard. I mean, I can't remember when I first saw a mountain, just like you said. Mount Hood's always been there, right, from the time you were born, okay? You don't remember specifically when you saw it because it was just there. Had to be whenever you became conscious of looking around, you saw it. Now, you grow up in New York, and I don't mean to say there are probably millions of people in the greater New York area who don't go to any museums, and that's tragic. But if we're dealing at least with the same sort of socioeconomic folks, your parents schlepped you to the museums all the time. It was part of your ordinary childhood experiences of going to museums, right?
Yeah, the schools also brought me.
Right. For most of us, like I remember the first time I went to the Portland Art Museum, I was in the first grade, and we went to see the Northwest Indian mask, Indian carved collection. My point is that when you're in those urban areas where you go to museums all the time, they're part of your ordinary experience. For most of us in the West, being outside, seeing the rivers, the mountains, is part of our ordinary experience. Going to museums was sort of a foreign sort of thing. Okay? So back to the exhibition here, the young man, I thought, wow, if there's a way I can sort of put some focus on collecting works on paper because they're more affordable and I can collect in depth and make those available for free to university and regional museums, maybe I can, in my own little way, help try to change that tide to try to get more people, especially young people, into museums to see this wonderful contemporary best of the artists in the country and world today working.
That's great, which is working. So maybe we could talk a moment about Kara Walker. Why did you decide to collect Kara Walker's works?
I like art that does generally 3 things to me. Okay, one, work that makes me laugh. Like I can't help look at a William Wegman with those Weimar dogs when he's got them all, and you look at those, and first you think how silly, then you think how silly to actually collect it. It's just fun, right? Just fun. Okay. Red Grooms, he does those wonderful constructions. I mean, you look at those and you suddenly feel like you're in New York City, in Little Italy, or you're in a cab driver, or you're Salvador Dali plates or whatever. Okay. I like work like maybe Sam Francis's later work. There's just beautiful colors and so forth, and it doesn't grab me intellectually. It just makes me feel like I'm walking through a field of flowers. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then I like work like this that just grabs me intellectually and won't let go. John Buck's work, where he has these nice images and all these political themes of nuclear plants and the environment and whatever. Okay. So therefore, Kara Walker's work, when I saw that first piece, I think it was 1998, I bought the first piece. How do you look at that? I didn't know who she was. It was the Ogden Gallery. I saw it and I said, wow, it just reached into me. It just grabbed me and it wouldn't let go. And I looked at that and I just felt the pain, the anguish. I mean, 1,000 thoughts all colliding.
Right.
Okay? The history, the technique, the slavery, idea, stereotype. Oh my gosh. And then with that silhouette technique, I couldn't escape. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't get away from it.
Do
It
you
was
try
just
and
so
meet
fun.
the artists that you collect?
No.
Really? On purpose? Not so it doesn't affect what you think about the work?
Yes. I think two things. One, I got a day job and been tough enough through this recession with the real estate business, and my daughters are now 15 and soon to be 17 this month. And I guess something else, and that is that I create, for me, these wonderful constructs about the art. And I'm so happy in what I've created about their work. And I guess I've been worried that if I love an artist's work and I met them and they were just a rude jerk, that would just totally screw up. Every time I look at their work, I would not be able to stop thinking about, what an asshole. I love the work, why'd they do that to me? Now, over time, I have begun to meet a number of these artists, but I also sort of don't go out of my way. I'm not a gaga in terms of movie stars or, I will say the artists I've met so far have been wonderful. John Baldessari grew up in National City, a lower class suburb of San Diego, Italian parents. Father would buy houses that were being torn down and take the wood, and John talks about when he was a little boy pounding the nails out of the board so his father could sell the wood. Mother had a big garden they were tying in the backyard. She gets him into taking piano lessons, then says, how about some art lessons? Takes art, loves it. In essence, taught for 50 years, finally at UCLA, always the teacher, wonderful man, towering big, 74 now, patient. He's the ever-present teacher. And the big fame came much later in his life. So his values were all set, and I've never seen any ego, any airs, any pretension. Wonderful man. Ellsworth Kelly, you just want to just listen to him like a wise grandfather. You just want to listen. Watching Ellsworth Kelly, we drove around on his property. The way that he would look at bushes and grass and trees and things, you saw maybe in the same way an amazing surgeon would look at, a body differently than how we look at a body. So I've met a fair number of the big artists, and so far they've been wonderful.
So I have 2 more questions, and then we'll open this up, okay? So my first one is, are there any stories about works that got away? Are there ones that, I can't believe I didn't get that, or one day I will?
Okay, it's 3 o'clock. This part will finish at 9. So
Pick 2.
this week I'm bidding on this made in California. So you want to see how accurate this is? Okay, there was a fabulous Fletcher Benton, 140 inches tall, 30 inches wide. Estimate was 18 to 20,000. I thought we'd actually put this into a shopping center where I need a piece of sculpture in Palm Desert. And I was busy talking to kids. I told Marissa Rosenberg I've worked with for 20 years at Sotheby's. I said, I'm going to have to hang up. You have to just bid. Just buy the 2 Roy DeForest and buy the Fletcher Benton. And I got back on the phone. She said, I chickened out after 18,000. I said, that one I really needed. Come on. Okay. So I've thought about it all week. Okay. Are the ones that get away? Tons of them. And I think this brings out another really more important point than whether we got that Fletcher Benton or not. And Fletcher Benton's a big California sculptor. Is that, I love the fact that there's so much more I want that I can't quite afford yet or allocate the money to or whatever. I can't imagine what it'd be like to have everything you want. So in terms of ones that get away, there are tons and tons and tons. And what's neat is they're still all there that want. In other words, Liechtenstein did a blue nude series. And when they came out, they were about $20,000 a piece. And at the time, whatever, I couldn't afford or whatever it was, didn't buy them. And God, I'd keep looking at them, and they are just breathtaking. And there's about 6 or 8, and there's some nudes laying down, one standing up, whatever. And they suddenly just hit, and now they're going for $250,000 a piece.
Wow.
Why? He's dead. They're amazing. As his paintings have gone up to be, 30, 40, 50 million bucks. A lot of works on paper depends upon what's happening in the New York art scene. Okay, when we went into a recession and the investment houses sort of pulled back a bit, think about it. If you're in that world, you live in those smaller co-ops and condos, the works on paper is smaller sized, whatever, and more affordable, even though the people make a lot of money there. It's so expensive to live there. So we can track that a bit. Always see those. In terms of the collection, there's lots of work that I think is very important to have, and it's agonizing. Right now, what I'm agonizing about is something else, and that is a question you haven't asked, and that is, are there a lot of things outside of the works on paper you want to buy? Well, there's Northwest Art I continue to buy, and I talked to Martha from the Lord So Gallery about this fabulous show you have upstairs of
the Joe Hamilton and I.
Yeah, I took pictures. I love the one of the map and the. I love the 2 images.
Right.
That
The
other
Portland
artist,
one.
that other artist that has the parents.
Irene.
The mother.
Yeah.
Oh, good, fabulous.
This is in our Schnitzer gallery, and it just opened this week. So if you haven't been there, Irene Hardwick Olivieri and Joe Hamilton, they're both Oregon artists, and it's just a wild, fabulous show.
Amazing. But I mean, there's just tons of things in terms of the purpose of building up this public collection. That while it will never be finished, there are huge hunks of pieces that I'm just wishing I could execute more on. But our business is coming back out of this recession in 6 tough years, and so we'll ramp up the art budget a little bit more. We'll get there, and as I said, I actually enjoy the fact there's all the stuff I want that I can't get to yet, because it's fun to still want things and have a goal and be happy and excited and
That's great. And I know we have lots of questions out here. Probably my last one to you is, what advice would you give people that are thinking about wanting to collect?
What I would say is, go to galleries and go to museums. The worst thing is to go to some art expert and say, tell me what I should have. Then you're missing the whole thing, I mean, that's like going to a restaurant and saying, hey, have somebody else order for me all the time. Gallery owners are wonderful, and gallery staff. Go to the galleries and just ask, why do you have that work? Why did you pick that artist? And explain what's going on. And they love it. They love helping to create customers. Go to museums. I talked about docents earlier. When they give a lecture, when you hear Jessie talk about this Kara Walker show, I'm so proud of her. She did such a great job. Graduate student, one of our own. Going to lose her for a little while to University of Texas at Austin. But she's written a brilliant piece in the giveaway there. And she adds so much. When I was listening to her on Tuesday talk to kids, because I don't do as good a job as I should getting in and reading and learning and all that. I mean, I can talk about all the artists as I look at them, but it's different than the curators and more erudite view. Not that one's better than the other, but I'm saying, just like with Clark Griffith, I learned so much more about those novels hearing from someone who's had the time. She wrote her thesis on Kara Walker, and then suddenly we decided to do a Kara Walker show. It was a marriage made in heaven. Okay? Right. One more thing, too, that you mentioned I left out about why the work's on paper. And I said it was fortuitous, went to the Ogden Gallery, bought a few of those prints. I'm ecumenical in terms of medium. Okay? But, what's also fabulous about works on paper is that prints have been around for 500 years. And it's actually amazing how affordable you can buy these early Rembrandt, Renoir. You can buy these. You can buy things that go back a couple hundred years for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. I mean, it's amazing, these little things. Okay, wow. Okay, but what happened post World War II, and most of you know this, is that starting with June Wayne creating Tamarind, there began to be some people, some artists, who realized they were better at helping produce other people's art than they're really making their own art. And this was really a blessing. So June Wayne created this Tamarind, and she developed a master printers program where she took people in and trained them to be master printers. They went out into the world, and right about that time you had Catherine Brown in San Francisco, opened Crown Point Press. Ken Tyler started at Gemini, then went on his own, ULAE, to Tanya Grossman. Now you've got High Point in Minneapolis, Sharks in Colorado, you've got Robert Lococo, you've got Tandem, you've got Paulson, you've got a number of fabulous publishing houses. Okay? And what that's allowed to do is, let's think about Chuck Close. Now, aside from the fact that he had some degeneration in his back that basically caused him to be a paraplegic, so he's in a chair and he has movement of his hands. Okay? He works with Pace, Dick Solomon's company in New York, and they have in Brooklyn a print publishing operation. And when you look at a Chuck Close work, we have a Chuck Close exhibition in Oklahoma City right now. On these latest works he does, these big, huge works, they go through the press 111, 140, well, the biggest one's 178 times. In other words, that piece of paper, they put the color on orange spots. They put it on the press, they roll it, they have it dry 178 times for all the different colors and things that go on there. Now, let alone that he is more paraplegic, he'd never do that. He does 2, 3 paintings a year. They sell for $3, $4, $5, $6 million bucks. There's probably a list of a dozen people. You know, the Newhouses, the Sachis, the Ken Griffin, Steve Cohn. I mean, you know, he probably decides, well, who is it I should let have one of my paintings this year? Okay? But he loves works on paper. So, but for the publishing house, we'd never get a chance to see these amazing images. They are technological masterpieces. Roy Lichtenstein, when he went to Gemini, and he wanted to use Mylar. Well, how do you get these Mylar things to stick on a piece of paper? So James Reed, the master printer for 33 years, spent 8 months working on these techniques. When I was there 2 weeks ago at Gemini in Melrose in LA, they're doing some new Richard Serras. It took them 8 months years ago to figure out how to get this thick paint on these Richard Serras. They tried automotive paints, they tried this, they tried that, all this stuff. So for me, aside from the medium not making any difference, the works on paper are even more exciting because of 2 things. Okay? The collaborative effect. So you're seeing something that's been the hand of several people. Okay? And the fact that right there when I'm looking at that work, that just gets me so excited. I realize it's an addition of 75 or 150 or whatever. That means there's 149 other people experiencing that too. I'm often asked, well, does that bother you that it's not a, I mean, I'm often asked this, well, you know, don't you buy originals? And I'll say, wait a second, okay? These are all original limited edition prints. Do you mean why don't I buy paintings? And then I'll say to that answer, I'll say, because look, in terms of buying a lot of Warhols or Lichtensteins or Ellsworth Kellys, that's already been done. They're spectacular collections. That Meyerhoff collection that's going to the National Gallery, amazing. Okay, Steve Cohn, what he's put together in a fairly short period of time. I mean, they're already giant. Eli Brode's collection, giant. That's been done. Okay, what I'm doing, not trying to buy plan, is something really quite unique in terms of the program. Okay, but in terms of the works on paper, I'll say, you know, what's the last novel that you read that you liked? And let's say it's a Grissom novel or something. Okay, and I'll say, well, did it bother you when you were reading that? Since that sold 9 million copies, did it bother you that maybe 28,000 other people were reading the same novel? Of course not. You're engrossed in yours. So the works on paper also somehow the fact it's a collaborative effort and other people can share the same experience, wonderful.
Good. Do you have a question?
It says here that you bought your first Kara Walker in 1997. So, being an early buyer, you
Bye,
must
Mary.
have contributed to her launch as a recognized artist, and that must make you feel pretty good. And I was wondering, have you done that for other newer artists, or just speak about that?
Did everyone hear that? Okay, so you were saying that Jordan bought one of Kara Walker's prints really early on in her career, which helped to validate her work, potentially.
Well, I'm assuming that because of the name you have as a collector, and she was fairly new at that point, that helped her.
I think that affords a aggrandized me in the collection.
Well, just tell me.
I think, right, I think on the other hand, what has happened now, because with all these exhibitions and the fact I'm such a big buyer at all the publishers and all the auction houses, so as I said downstairs, I've become the largest individual print buyer with Sotheby's, Christie's, Phillips, Bonhams, and with all the publishing houses, generally the largest buyer too. On the other hand, what that means for the auction houses is while I'm important and they're wonderful to me in the print departments, we are such a fraction in dollars. Like I had this big show at Sotheby's about 6-8 weeks ago. They called up Mary Bartow, heads up print department, and adore her. And I bid with her on all the auctions. And I looked up what we'd spent with Sotheby's the last 10 years. And with Sotheby's, the total purchases were like $3.7 million. So when I don't mean to say that $3.7 million isn't a fair amount of money. For me to have spent on average $370,000 a year is, although they've often sold a Jasper Johns flag for $600,000, it's more than what I spent, okay? But compared to what's happened in the contemporary and the paintings and whatever, that's like taking a Warhol painting and cutting out a 12-inch square and saying there's $3 million worth of art, okay? So I think it's more what the publishing houses love and what the auction houses love is programmatically what I'm doing, because it's the real thing. Mary Bartow was out last June in Portland, speaking at the Portland Art Museum and meeting with some customers. So of course she called ahead and we spent half a day together. And I said, I've had a tough time getting any shows in New York. I was frustrated that the Whitney wouldn't take the Ellsworth Kelly show. I didn't give a whit. For me, it's not like I want a show at the Whitney because it's Jordan Schnitzer's prints. None of that, okay? It's with Ellsworth Kelly, with that amazing show, and he hadn't had an exhibition for a long time in New York of any of his work. Now, suddenly with his 90th birthday, there were a bunch of exhibitions, which is wonderful. Okay? But the Whitney called up, and David, the head of prints, said, look, we have a policy that we don't take any one-person shows. I said, why? He says, well, to be frank with you, we have a lot of pretty important people on our board. The Henry Kravitzes, the Lauders, no, that one, but I mean, big-time people. Well, for them, when they're buying some Warhol, Lichtenstein, Richter's, whatever, they want to get those paintings in the Modern Museum because of the provenance. So you're a museum director and you say, holy cow, and I'm being polite here, oh my God, Henry Kravitz has given us $100 million. He's putting pressure on me. He just bought a fabulous new Picasso and he wants us to show it. What do I do to my staff? We say no to him and piss him off. That's not great. Okay, well, let's put a policy in that, we're going to help protect ourselves from, okay. I said, look, David, there are 150 each of the Ellsworth Kelly prints. That doesn't do anything for the value. First, I don't sell anything. I already told you, it means nothing money-wise. There's no additional provenance to the Ellsworth Kelly prints at the Whitney versus the Whatcom Museum in Bellingham, where I'm going in 2 weeks for an exhibition of our stuff. But anyway, so she said, we've got a couple-week period where we have some downtime. Would you mind putting some prints up? I said, that'd be great. Now, in these 25 years I've been their biggest print customer, I've only been there one time, okay? All the auctions I do on the phone and that's a whole other kind of story. As I said, I'm in the bathroom shaving, bidding. I'm at the office working, and this going on, and I have this. Okay. So I thought it was a small space. Well, suddenly they start talking about all the prints. It's like 400 things. My God! So we sent 367 prints, the biggest print show in New York's history, to Sotheby's, and I was really sort of bummed out. In fact, I really was sort of pissed off. And I said to Catherine Malone, our collections manager, I said, my God, what's this going to cost to ship it back there? Because they didn't pay for anything. Well, it was $17,000 each way, $35,000. I said, wow. And then we printed a brochure up, okay? And then we were going to host a dinner afterwards for 90 people, which is fine. That's fun. So, that's in contrast to, I'll tell you this, okay? And I'm sitting there thinking, after I come back from New York, we're going to Missoula, Montana, where the Under Pressure show that you're getting is going. Okay? Now, when the director of the Missoula, Montana exhibition called, Laura Millen, she'd been, I guess, a big art person in Seattle, but I hadn't known her then. And she came to Portland, and I said, tell me about your outreach program. She said, well, we bring in all the 5th graders from the public schools. I said, that's great. I said, how many is that? She said, 1,200. I said, that's great. I said, but what about all the other grade school kids? She said, we don't have enough money. I said, why don't you figure out what that costs and we'll write you a check. Okay. And then I said, now who else is around Missoula? Because I've never been there, hadn't been. She said, well, there's a Indian reservation. I said, oh, we love Indian reservations. Which one is it? She said, the Salish and Kootenai reservation. I said, how far away is it? She said, about 30 miles. I said, do you know the tribal leaders? She says, well, yes, because I said, I've worked with a number of tribes. And I said, and what's amazing about this exhibition is Under Pressure, which you're getting here, started in Omaha. And about 2 or 3 years ago, I'm at the Arlington Club in Portland having lunch, and I see Brian Fricio, the director of the museum. He's having lunch. I go over and say hello to him. He says, I think you should meet Toby Jurevix. Hi, Toby. What do you do? I'm the contemporary curator of the Joslin Art Museum in Omaha, which I'd never heard of. And I said, great. And I said, gee, I collect a lot of prints. Why don't you come by the office? He comes by, sees our art room, looks at it, and he says, you really have this program where you loan these works out for free? Yeah. You ever had a show in the Midwest? No. I think my director, Jack Becker, would like to talk to you. Great. Jack Becker calls the next week. 2 weeks later, he comes out, spends all this time looking at the books, picks out 140 works, says, now, is this really true? We can borrow this all for free? Yeah, and I'll pay the shipping one way, you pay the other way. And I said, look, as long as it's back there, you must know, just as Jill does, other museum directors, let's have it go some other places. Calls back, he says, the Wichita Museum would like it, the Salt Lake Museum, where we'd had an exhibition, would like it, and the Missoula, Montana Museum. And now you've signed up for it, and I think Bellevue too. And I said, that's great, Jack. And what I loved what he did is when he picked out the work, not only did he pick out, as you can see, the Hung Lu, the Jasper Johns, Ellsworth Kelly, Fabulous Donald Judd, Liechtenstein Bulls, Chuck Close, Red Grooms, Barbara Kruger, all these amazing names. But he also picked 2 of our Northwest Native American artists, Rick Bartow, we love, and Joe Feddersen. I couldn't believe it. I was thrilled. Okay?
And we're working on a major Rick Bartow show here.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah,
So
I know what you have.
Getting back to Laura Millen, when she comes to meet with me, and I said, geez, let's work with the Indian reservation. Can you see about, whether we could bring in all the kids from the grade school on the reservation? She said, yes. And I said, on top of that, look, since Jack Becker already picked the Joe Feddersen and Rick Bartow work, okay, we've got a lot more of their work. Why don't we add some more Rick Bartow and Joe Feddersen work so when the Native American kids come to the exhibition, they see one of their own on the walls, and on top of that, why don't we call Rick or Joe and see if one of them will come on over and be an artist in residence? So we funded that for $5,000 more, okay? And Joe Feddersen went over for a week and was the artist in residence. I'm coming back to New York in a second. So I sit there thinking, wow, we're funding the Native American kids from the reservation to come see the best of the U.S. artists, plus 2 Native American from Northwest tribes, and I got Joe Feddersen there. That just sends chills down my back, okay? Now I'm in New York. We're spending $35,000 just to send the stuff back there. And it's not like this is an unserved community. All my other shows, okay? So I'm I'm honored that Sotheby's is letting us have the space, but it's not like I'm getting work to, which is much my mission, to get unserved people. And yet when I walked into Sotheby's and I saw this work, this exhibition, it just was incredible. And interestingly enough, they invited all these great people, lots of people in from all the auction houses and the museum, all the heads of all the print departments, all the museums and whatever, and they invited 1,200 people. And as I was addressing all those people, I told them this exact story. I said, on one hand, I wasn't too excited when I realized how big a show this was going to be, okay? On the other hand, I talk about the importance of collecting art of your region. And this just happens to be art of your region. It just happens to be in New York that the best of your local artists just happen to be the biggest and best names of the contemporary art of the last 50 years. And the fact that it was so much, it was the biggest print show in history in New York, that it helped again our mission of raising the appreciation for works on paper. So in the end, I was thrilled with the exhibition in New York, just as I was with all those kids in Missoula.
So, oh my. Okay, Jack, we'll start with you.
Yeah, great story. I'd be curious if you have a program, an explicit program to support new artists, young artists, and do you ever commission work to support new artists, young artists?
Not really. So the answer is basically no. And what I'm dying to do is two things. What I'm doing in terms of the collection isn't risky at all. I mean, I'm buying blue chip names. So it's not gutsy in that way. Programmatically, I'm pushing the envelope. I don't think anybody does as many exhibitions nationally now as we do. Not that I'm trying to, I mean, what warms my heart is that I'm this facilitator, this little steward between these brilliant artists and those kids from that Indian reservation. That makes me excited, and it's such a drop in the bucket compared to how many people are out there don't get to see this work. But no, I don't do emerging artists, and what I'd love to do, and as the business gets a little bit better, because I'm getting older here, is I'm probably going to allocate X amount a year, because I'd love to do with like what the Rebels do. Like right now I'm sitting here, there's a Hosea McInerney piece that Andy Rosen has, and I saw it 2 years ago and I loved it. It's a big plexiglass piece of a building and whatever, and you know, it was $250,000 and they'll cut it down to $175, and I talked to her last week. I'm sitting there thinking, could I do this? And the other voice comes in and says, boy, I'm just stretched anyway, and I'm talking to Matthew Marks about ramping up a lot more of Jasper Johns' holdings to have an exhibition of Jasper Johns' work, and I need to just be disciplined and stick with, right now, building up more of the print collection for the program we have. But I'd love to have that piece. So eventually we'll get to be buying more of different mediums of some different things. We'll allocate some out for that. But so I'm not really doing emerging artists. We do commission artists for different projects sometimes, for buildings and things. But I don't do the emerging artists because I'm disciplined to try to build the program we're doing.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, you talked about Clark Griffith in the class on literature, whether there was an applied art or art history class here at the university that you remember. And the reason I ask that question is because between the time I saw Mount Hood out of our picture window and I went to the same Portland Art Museum and saw the Indian dugout canoes, my first exposure to art was actually in an art class in school, in which I participated like the fifth graders. And it was very basic, of course. It was the finger painting and so forth. And I made it, and I took it home to my parents, and they were more thrilled with it than I was. But that, I think, was an experience which I just took as normal. And then there was music class, and then there was language class where we did fractured French. But I understand that in schools today, that just isn't the case. That we think that art is tangential, music is tangential, so we have to cut that because we don't have the money. So programs such as you're supporting, where the fifth graders can either go to the art museum or take classes, are critically important.
It's a tragic, that's why I think more of the effort needs to come, again, through the private sector and leveraging resources like the museum here to have more classes here. And I'd love to see a program where the museum actually goes into the schools, working with the art department staff and graduate students and so forth. Last night we had Oregon College of Arts and Crafts, which is a 100-year-old institution in Portland. 17 years ago, the then director, Bonnie Lang Malcolmson, came, and she was trying to raise some money for the school. It's on Barnes Road. The Vollums, who founded Tektronix, gave them the property, and they built a new campus out there, and they were beginning to try to raise $14 million, and we gave them, I think, $1.5 million towards that to redo all the buildings. But in the meantime, she asked 17 years ago if I'd give some money, and I said, well, tell me, what do you do with the campus during the summer? She said, well, nothing. I said, well, my God, there's so many kids out there who have nothing to do. Why don't we create a summer camp program? So we gave them $15,000, and they started a program. The next year gave them a little more and more. Now we're serving 1,000 kids. They also named it the Jordan Schnitzer Family Art Adventures Program. Last night they had an event at the Art Museum for 500 people. I got up and raised, when I got up and raised $250,000 for them. I gave 50, and it was matched by a few other folks and whatever. Then they raised a few $100,000 more. And the goal there is to, there shouldn't be one child that can't go to that program. And I talked all about, in that room, I said, we're the lucky ones. There are all the people out there that aren't in the room. And those moms and dads come and they talk about the lower privileged ones. So 2 weeks or 3 weeks in art class for those less privileged kids, that's transformational. We don't track what it does or what, but you just know, and it gives them a sense of pride. And what I said to them, I said, look, I said, when you're dealing with your hands, your heart, and your mind, and you're creating something, just like that fingerprint you were doing, or the things we all did, okay? Yes, might someone become fine artists? You bet, but that'll be an infinitesimal amount. But the fact is, in terms of their identity and their values, and some sort of balance in their lives, that's why we all who are committed to the arts have to reach in. Public schools aren't going to be getting any more money in the near future, so we've got to figure out other ways that every young person has that chance in an awfully complex world they're growing up in.
So, do you have a question?
Personally, how do you view the use of titling compared to no titles in the work you collect?
The works already come, virtually all the works come with titles already. So you're talking about the titles of the shows, or talking about the titles of the work?
The titles of the work, sometimes people just do not title work.
Then we put untitled on it.
Okay, that's
Right.
That's all you can
But you bring up an interesting sideline question, and that is, I remember we had the first Warhol show, and especially with the Marilyns, the Maos, all those multiple images, we sat there saying, well, what order are they in? Okay? Hey, is there any instruction that he wanted this one, this one, this one? And you know what? So we called the Warhol Foundation, whatever. No one seemed to know. So what we did in that case is we looked at the catalog raisonné, and we just took the way they were done in the catalog raisonné. Not that I ever checked with that person that created the catalog raisonné whether they got any instruction as to which order the Marilyns, the Maos, the 10 Jews, the ad set, whatever. But no, we just we try to follow what the artist wants to do.
So maybe one more question?
You've already expressed the opinion that there is some art which is not blue chip art. Would you have any feeling as to what fraction or proportion of the things that you now consider blue chip may not be considered blue chip 100 years from now?
Gosh.
Do you care?
I only buy what I like. Okay, so I don't. I remember one time years ago, someone was saying, "Well, you really should buy this," and I bought it, and I didn't like it. And every time I looked at it, all I thought about is, I bought it because someone else told me to buy it. Whereas I figured, as long as I like what I buy, then I'm happy with it. Now, as I've developed this collection, I often buy stuff that historically is important that might not reflect like some early Roy Lichtenstein, very representational stuff. Actually, I like it, but it's not like the stuff I love of his bulk of his work, but it's fascinating to see from an educational experience. So I would advise back to collecting and buy what you like. And in terms of the art out there, as I said, you can be a paint by numbers person and do that and put that on your wall, and that's art, and be darn proud of it. And you can go to any art fair and buy Sunday artist, work, and be happy with that. I mean, as long as you're happy with it and the work speaks to you, then it's working. Now, there's a difference of reading that Grissom novel versus the Faulkner novel. Okay? I mean, both bring you enjoyment. One might consume you for entertainment versus the other might not only entertain you but also put you through your paces with themes and depth and so forth. Okay? I mean, if we asked in that example, for instance, that ties into your question, in 50 years, how many people are going to read the Grissom novel versus the Faulkner novels, or the Fitzgerald or Hemingway or Bellow, or whoever we want to talk about? I think there's a reason why the best of class continues to be held in esteem. Now, whether, for instance, a Murakami right now may go up or down, or one can say within the art world there are some things that may be more fad-oriented.
Good. Well, I think we can people can talk to you informally,
Sure.
And we can also go up and see the Kara Walker show.
Oh, yeah. Go.
But thank you, Jordan, and
bet.
please join me in thanking Jordan.